Today, let's have a look at linear equations that have variables in the denominator. So we've dealt with equations that have denominators, but they've only been numeric so far. So as soon as there's a variable involved, we need to look at something else as well. But before we do that, let's look at the LCD, which we've learned how to work out. So first of all, ignore the x's for the moment, and let's just look at the numbers. So we've got a 3, a 2, and a 6. If we use that method for finding the LCD, we're going to know that the numeric part of it is going to be 6, because 2 and 3 can both divide into 6 exactly. And then we need to look at the x's. So because in both cases the x is just x to the power of 1, all we need is an x to the power of 1, because that's a representation of the x in this denominator and the x in that denominator. So we've got our LCD, which is 6x. So now what we need to consider, and I suggest you do it right at the beginning of the equation before you start working it out, because one tends to forget at the end, is we need to make a restriction. So because x is in the denominator, x is not going to be equal to a certain thing. So let's go back a little bit in theory. So if we had 0 divided by anything, let's say 0 divided by 7. 0 divided by 7 is going to give us an answer of 0. But if we had a number, any number, divided by 0, it's impossible to divide by 0, so in that case the answer would be undefined. In other words, there is no answer for that. So we cannot have a denominator of 0. So here, if x was equal to 0, then this would become undefined. Here also, if x was equal to 0, 2 times 0 would be 0, and that whole fraction would become undefined. So we need to say right at the beginning that x, in this case, is not equal to 0. In the next video, we'll look at ones where x is not equal to other numbers, which would then make the denominator 0. So once we've done that, we need to now multiply out every single one of the 4 terms by the LCD, which in this case also involves a variable this time. So we're going to think of the term we've already got, and we're going to multiply it by the LCD minus the term we've got, and we just keep doing this all the way through. Right, once we've done that, then we can see what cancels, and if we've chosen the correct LCD, things should cancel in such a way that all the denominators should become 1. So x divides into x, 3 divides into itself once and into 6 twice, x divides into x, and 2 divides into 6 3 times, 6 divides into 6, and now we need to just tidy up and see what we left over with. And if you look, all of the denominators did cancel completely. So here I'm left with 2 times 6 minus 1 times 2. And I still have the x because it didn't cancel. There was no x in the denominator. There the x's did cancel, so I'm just left with 1 times 3. And the 6 is cancelled, so I'm just left with x. I'm now going to tidy up and get my x's on the one side and numbers on the other side. So here I have, be careful, negative 2x, and it's not moving sides, so it remains negative. This one's coming across, so positive becomes negative. The 3 is staying there. The 12 is going across. It was positive. It's becoming negative. Negative 2x minus 1x is negative 3x. And 3 minus 12 is negative 9. So I need to divide by whatever the coefficient is, do the same to the other side, and therefore I'll be left with x is equal to negative divided by negative is positive, 9 divided by 3 is 3. And there's my final answer. Right, let's have a look at another example. We've got 4 over x plus 1 over 2 minus, 2 over 3x equals 1 plus 3 over 4x. Right, first step we need to do is to find our LCD. So, looking at the numbers, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 is the biggest number. So can 2 divide into 4? Yes, it can. Can 3 divide into 4? No, it can't. So we try 8. 3 can't go into 8. Next multiple of 4 is 12. Both of these can divide into 12. So we have 12. And then we need to look for the highest exponent, the highest power of x. And all of them are x to the power of 1. So my LCD is going to be x to the power of 1. Remember then, find out what x is not allowed to be equal to because it is in the denominator. And again, 12 times 0 would make it 0. So x is not equal to 0. If we go back to here, when you get your final answer, you need to just quickly go back to your restriction and see, am I allowed to have this number? And yes, the only restriction was on 0. So we are allowed to have an answer of 3. Okay, now this time, instead of writing all of this down, I'm going to do this in my head because I know there are many of you that will be able to do that. So that's why it's so important to have your LCD over here. So what you do is you look at this denominator and you compare it to the LCD and you imagine if you were dividing 12x by x, the x's would cancel and you'd be left with the 12. So now I've got 12 times 4, which is 48. Compare that to the LCD. 2 goes into 12x, 6x times. 6x times 1 is 6x. 3x divides into 12x 4 times because the x's cancel and 3 goes into 12 4 times. Take that answer. 4 times 2 is 8. Because this had no denominator at all, there's no ways that this can cancel with anything in the denominator because it's not there. So we're left with that entire LCD being multiplied by 1. So that will be 12x. 4x divides into 12x 3 times. Multiply that by that. 3 times 3 is 9. So you can see that if you can manage to alleviate this orange step and do that in your head, that's great. But I always say to people, if you're going to make careless mistakes by leaving this step out, then it's worth doing it. So it just depends on your level of processing and especially your mental maths. And because so many of us are now completely dependent on calculators, a lot of people find this difficult to do in their heads. Right, I'm going to keep my positive 6x here. And this 12x is coming across as negative 12x. The 9 is staying where it is. Negative 8 becomes positive 8. And positive 48 becomes negative 48. 6x minus 12x is negative 6x. And then I've got, well, I would start here actually. I would say positive 8 minus 48 is equal to negative 40. And negative 40 plus 9 is going to be negative 31. You can do things in different orders as long as you make sure that you're looking at the sign that belongs to that. So this was a positive 8 subtracting 48. So in other words, we're left with negative 40. And then adding, because that hasn't got a sign, it's obviously a plus sign. Negative 40 plus 9 is going to give me that. Divide by negative 6. Divide by negative 6. So x is equal to negative divided by negative is positive. 6 goes into 31. 5 times. I've got 1 left over. So that makes the fraction 1/6. And don't worry if you get an answer of a fraction or a mixed number. It can happen. Just be careful when you do that calculation. Right, I hope you're going to look out for The next episode, which is also going to have variables in the denominator, but the variables, the denominators are going to be much more complex. We're going to need to factorize them before we can find the LCD, and that will be looking at these linear equations on a much higher level, and those are the kind of questions that are going to be asked in exams. So if you don't want to miss the next video, please subscribe and then look out for it. I hope this was helpful.